everyone, and thank you so much for joining us. My name is Michaela Vrazdova, and I'm an associate at Scott Legal. We are going to spend some time today talking about the National Interest Waiver green card option, also known as NIW. This is very underutilized visa category and one that we have started to see more and more people to use this green card, and in particular, the entrepreneur category. A few things I wanted to go over before we get started. Scott Legal is a full-service immigration firm, and we offer different types of visa services, including the National Interest Waiver green card category. We will continue this webinar series, and we'll continue to have at least 2 webinars a month on different visa topics. At the end of this webinar, we'll send you a couple of things. We'll send you an NIW PowerPoint, and we'll also send you an NIW comprehensive visa guide. We'll also send you a link where you will be able to sign up for additional webinars we'll continue to have. Regarding our panelists today, we are lucky to have Kelly Legrand-Wiener, who is the managing attorney at Scott Legal, and I will be moderating this panel. Both of us have vast experience in the National Interest Waiver visa category. If you have any questions as we talk about the National Interest Waiver, please feel free to add them to the Q&A section or in the chat box, and we will go over them at the end of the presentation, or if they are relevant to what we are talking about, we will answer them live. And finally, this webinar will be recorded and will be made available on demand. So without further delay, I will turn it to Kelly, who will tell us more about the National Interest Waiver. So thank you so much, Kelly. Can you start by telling us a little bit about the NIW visa requirements?
Sure. So thank you, Michaela. Yes, so as Michaela mentioned, we'll be talking about the NIW today, and we'll get started with just the basic requirements to qualify for a national interest waiver. So the national interest waiver is a green card category. So it allows people to live in the United States permanently, and it's under the EB2 category, which means that there is a threshold requirement that any applicant have either an advanced degree, meaning a master's degree or higher, or its equivalent, which is a bachelor's degree plus 5 years of post-baccalaureate progressive experience. Or if you don't have a degree, you can qualify by showing exceptional ability in the sciences, arts, or business. And we'll talk a little bit more about exceptional ability later in the program, but you have to meet at least 3 of 7 criteria and show a degree of expertise significantly above that ordinarily encountered in your field. So once you've met that criteria, that threshold EB2 criteria, then we move to the national interest waiver part of the category. So in a normal EB2 filing, you're going to have an employer that's sponsoring you through what we call the PERM process for a green card, and you have to file a labor certification with the Department of Labor and test the U.S. labor market. The National Interest Waiver allows us to waive that, that PERM requirement, so that you don't have to have a labor certification certified by the Department of Labor or test the labor market for the National Interest Waiver. What you have to do to prove that you qualify for that waiver is show that you have a proposed endeavor that has substantial merit and national importance, that you are well positioned to advance that proposed endeavor, and then that there's a showing on balance that it's beneficial to the United States to waive the requirements of the job offer and the labor certification.
Thank you, Kelly. And you mentioned that one way how to meet the threshold requirement is through a bachelor's degree and the progressive work experience. So can you describe in a little bit more detail how do you show the progressive work experience and what does it mean?
Sure. So progressive work experience, in order to qualify, if you're going to use the bachelor's in progressive work experience, you need to get letters from your former employers you know, and you make sure to document in those letters the progressive aspects of responsibility that you had in each of these roles. You know, for people that were self-employed, you may need to look for other documents. You know, a letter from yourself, you know, wouldn't necessarily be sufficient. You would perhaps need affidavits from other, you know, high-level employees in the companies, letters from perhaps the board of directors or investors, or even if you have kind of client contracts, you know, confirming your role within that company.
Thank you. And is the exceptional ability for the NIW the same standard as the extraordinary ability for an EB-1A green card? And if not, how are they different?
Right. So they're not the same. There's actually a very significant difference. So exceptional ability means a degree of expertise significantly above that ordinarily encountered. Whereas extraordinary ability is a much, much higher standard that's referring to people who have sustained national or international acclaim in their field. And those are really the people that have risen to the very, very top of their field. So I think sometimes when clients see, you know, if they don't have that advanced degree or they don't have the bachelor's degree and the progressive work experience, you know, they're concerned that exceptional ability makes it not an option for them, but it can be an option because it really is not the same as extraordinary ability. To qualify under exceptional ability, you want to show that you meet at least 3 of 7 criteria. Those criteria will be outlined on the PowerPoint that you'll receive, but just to go over some of them, you know, an official academic record, letters documenting 10 years of full-time experience, a license in your profession, evidence of a high salary, membership in a professional association. So those are the types of things you would need to show, but you want to keep in mind that it's not sufficient to just show, okay, I'm a member of a profession, you know, or a member of a professional association. You also need to show that being a member demonstrates that exceptional ability by showing expertise significantly above that ordinarily encountered. So you would want to show that to be a member, you have to have achieved certain things in your career in order to be invited to be a member, as opposed to a membership where perhaps you just pay a fee and anybody in your field can become a member.
Thank you. And Kelly, what would you say is like the typical scenario for like the NIW? Like, do you need to be does the applicant need to be like a W-2 employee of a US company, or can like an entrepreneur who has a company in the US qualify for the NIW?
So if you're an entrepreneur and you want to self-petition, you can qualify for the NIW. I think typically most NIW applicants are going to self-petition. It is possible to do a national interest waiver through a U.S. employer that they can sponsor you, but most of the time, and for maximum flexibility within the process, you know, applicants will choose to self-petition.
And can you give us an example of an entrepreneur national interest waiver visa application?
Sure. So in one particular scenario, there was an entrepreneur who was setting up a consulting firm to work on improving services to U.S. veterans. This case was actually initially denied and then was ultimately approved, you know, upon appeal to the Administrative Appeals Office. And the way that this person qualified, as we go through each of the criteria, you know, they had when we're talking about substantial merit and national importance, they had news articles, they had research reports that documented the lack of quality services available for returning veterans, documented the issues with their physical and emotional well-being, and showed, you know, that the work they were going to do in their consulting firm you know, would have that substantial merit and was of national importance based on the constituents they'd be serving. When we look at kind of the specific endeavor they were undertaking, they wanted to improve programs and assist organizations that provide support and advocacy for veterans and wounded warriors. They were able to include letters from senior officials in the U.S. government agencies, Business and charitable organizations also confirmed, that the kind of substantial merit and national importance of this particular endeavor, the importance of providing effective programs for U.S. veterans to return home and transition to civilian life. Then so we've met that first prong, right? Substantial merit and national importance. Now we're going to the second prong, where we're able to say, to ask, does this person have the ability to advance the proposed endeavor? And this particular person, did happen to be a veteran themselves, so they had that firsthand experience, but they also had lots of letters, from these same, government agencies, business and charitable organizations that talked about their particular prior successes and the impacts that they had made through specific projects that they'd done before. So, kind of metrics about kind of the success they'd had with similar types of programs, managing, high dollar values when it comes to charitable funding, and showing that he was a really, really key person within the linking of these, this funding to agencies that were serving the veteran community. So he was able to show that, this particular person was well positioned to advance the endeavor and had a track record of success in this area. And then finally, when we look at the third prong, so that on balance it's beneficial to waive the requirement of the labor certification. This person was going to be an entrepreneur, so that the PERM process itself is not set up for entrepreneurs. If you're the majority owner of a company, you cannot be sponsored for a PERM. So we're able to show that it's really not possible, for this person to kind of get the visa through the normal process. And then additionally, he was able to show that this person was kind of so equipped to do this work, and this work was so important that even if there were other people in the United States doing this work, it was still beneficial to the United States to have this particular person doing this work. And therefore, it was not only impractical to obtain a labor certification, but even beyond that, it was beneficial to have them doing this work. And therefore, the third prong was also satisfied, and the case was ultimately approved.
Thank you. And Kelly, for entrepreneurs, do they need like an established company in the US, or can they qualify through a new company, through a startup as well?
So you do not have to have an established company to qualify for a national interest waiver. Prospective impact can qualify, and this was specified in a case called Matter of Danazar. That was really the case that changed the standard for the national interest waiver, changed it from something that was much less friendly to entrepreneurs and everyone generally, but specifically entrepreneurs, to a much more friendly standard. And they specifically said that prospective impact can qualify. So, coming in with a startup is possible. However, if you're doing a startup, it is important to be able to show that you, as the applicant, have the ability to advance the proposed endeavor. So that means you should have a track record of success doing a similar project. It may not be that you were doing, you may not have been doing it in your own company. Perhaps you were doing it in other organizations, but you need to be able to show that you yourself have the ability to, put forth the plan that you're going to have for the business, and then execute that plan successfully. So it is something, to consider. If you have an established company and the company has been doing very well, that can obviously be very beneficial, because you have the ability to show that you're doing the endeavor and the endeavor is doing well. On the other hand, if you want to start a new enterprise, that's certainly something that, is possible for the national interest waiver, and many people will do it, as long as you can show you have that track record of success. You also want to be able to show, for example, proof of investor interest in your company. Perhaps you can get letters from prospective vendors or government, charitable, or private businesses who are interested in working with you. So if you are going to have a startup, it's really key to have some of that, investor interest and, a business plan to show how you're actually going to capitalize the company, that you have the funding to make this project successful.
Thank you. And Kelly, what is the estimated timeline to get the actual green card through the EB2 category from the moment you file the I-140 petition?
Sure. So premium processing is not generally available yet for a national interest waiver. cases, but the situation is improving. So for right now, national interest waiver petitions that were filed on or before February 1st, 2022 have the ability to now file for premium processing. Premium processing would mean you pay an additional $2,500 and then they will take action on the case within 45 days. So that can mean that they issue a request for evidence. It could mean they issue notice of intent to deny, or they could approve or deny the case. For anyone that's kind of not, filing now, like let's say you were filing today, processing times are several months, even up to and over a year. And then once you get, the I-140 approved, the green card process is taking a long time as well. And that's going to depend on if you're in the US, what service center, or what location you're in and what the field office processing times are. But for many field offices, processing times for the green card are, up to and over a year.
And does filing the I-140 give you any status in the US? Can you stay in the US once you file the I-140?
So unfortunately, no, the I-140 on its own does not provide you with any status in the US. So like, let's say you're here on a visa and you file the I-140, as long as your underlying visa remains valid, you can remain in the US, but the actual filing of the I-140 does not give you any status. If you wanted to stay in the US on the basis of the I-140, you would need to also have be here in a valid status and have an immigrant visa available to you based on the visa bulletin, and then you could file the I-485 green card application. Filing the green card application does give you that ability to stay in the US in a period of authorized stay, but the I-140 on its own does not give you any status.
And what about family members? Can family members apply for green cards as well? And which family members can apply?
Yes. So your family members, once you get to the stage of filing for your green card, your family members can apply with you as derivative applicants. And it's your spouse and any unmarried children under 21 who can apply with you.
Thank you. And Kelly, what documents, what type of evidence is usually included in the NIW application?
Sure. So, the first is kind of proof that you meet one of the threshold requirements. So if you have an advanced degree, you're going to include a copy of your advanced degree and your transcripts. If you are qualifying with the bachelor's plus 5 years of experience, you're going to include the employer letters or other evidence of your progressive post-baccalaureate work experience. If you have a degree that is, equivalent to a U.S. degree, you want to include that credentials evaluation. If you're applying based on the exceptional ability, you're going to include evidence that you have exceptional ability. Some people think you need to include both. You don't. If you're qualifying based on the advanced degree, you're just going to submit that advanced degree. You don't also have to include any exceptional ability, documents. Then you're going to move to the evidence that you qualify for the National Interest Waiver. So for substantial merit and national importance, you want to include things like news articles, academic papers, market research, any relevant data and statistics from credible sources. If you're an entrepreneur, you're going to want to include a comprehensive business plan, and any kind of other objective evidence that you can get. Government reports sometimes are very helpful to demonstrate, why this particular endeavor is important to the government. You also want to include expert letters. Expert letters can be used a few different ways. So one is they can be used to demonstrate substantial merit and national importance. If you have experts in the field, they can kind of speak to why the endeavor is so important, what impact it's going to have. And then as well, the expert letters are important to show that the applicant themselves is well positioned to advance the endeavor. So you want those expert letters to really, point out why this particular person has the ability to run this project, point to any kind of particularly impressive, accomplishments in the past. You're also going to want to include, when we talk about this prong of the second prong to show the applicant is well positioned to advance the endeavor, we're going to want to include the applicant's resume, their degrees, any proof of their professional accomplishments. So things like awards, any patents, any kind of presentations at industry conferences, any media recognition. any evidence of past history of success in a relevant field. All of those things would be really, really helpful. As well for entrepreneurs, they could include proof of contracts, letters of intent, proof of startup capital, proof of investor interest, proof of any, if they were in any kind of accelerator or incubator, proof of being in those, is very helpful as well, particularly for entrepreneurs.
And Kelly, you mentioned expert letters. So can someone who already had some sort of non-immigrant visa in the US in past, such as O1 visa, resubmit expert letters from that petition in the NIW petition?
So it's generally not recommended. I think that, the National Interest Waiver is quite specific. And even though there's some overlap in particular areas with the extraordinary ability visas like the O1 and the EB1A, generally, you're going to want to, not reuse those letters. You're going to want to have different letters because the letters are going to need to address the substantial merit and national importance and really address the endeavor. And, oftentimes, for O's or things like that, the standard can be kind of a lower standard. It's a non-immigrant visa as opposed to a green card. And as well, I think it just generally the focus of the letters needs to be refined for the NIW. So perhaps some of what you put in there about the applicant's accomplishments can be reused, but the letters themselves will generally need to be rewritten or refined to include more of an NIW focus and talk about the proposed endeavor along with the applicant's accomplishments.
And how does a typical expert letter for an NIW look like? What sections should it have? And then who are usually the experts? Like who would you ask to write this kind of letter?
So this, I think, will vary a bit more in the National Interest Waiver than it will perhaps. And, so for example, you may have people that are experts in your particular field. So for example, when we go back to the example of the veteran, they had very high level senior, government officials in the military writing letters explaining the substantial merit and national importance of the endeavor, and also talking about their own particular dealings with the, with the applicant. So, for an NIW, though, you may also have, experts that are speaking that maybe don't know the applicant very well and are really writing primarily to just support the national importance and the substantial merit. You may have experts that are not necessarily as well versed in the field, but are, well versed in kind of the applicant's accomplishments. Ideally, you'd have experts that are, able to speak to both, but it will kind of depend on what the person's particular background is. Another thing that sometimes gets used for, this is a little bit different than expert letters, but for NIW petitions, sometimes if you're an entrepreneur and you're making an impact or you're making an argument based on perhaps employment or economic impact, you may want to get an economist report where they'll actually look at your business plan and they will put in data and statistics and kind of numbers that will help, show how this particular endeavor is going to be economically, beneficial or have, good employment for particular areas. So that can be another type of letter that's potentially helpful for the National Interest Waiver.
Thank you. And Kelly, what can, for the entrepreneur category, what can entrepreneurs do to strengthen their NIW petition?
Sure. So I think if we're talking about entrepreneurs who are doing a startup, you want to really have a very strong business plan. You want to have evidence of that startup funding. So, evidence that kind of there are outside investors interested in your idea. The higher amount that can be is very, very helpful. If there's any kind of lucrative contracts you've been able to sign, any letters from industry experts who want to support your endeavor or work with the applicant, any kind of other proof of the track record of success. So if there's been media around the startup or around previous startups or business enterprises of the entrepreneur, that can be really helpful. Applying to or getting accepted into, incubators and accelerators can be really, really helpful. So those are all kind of ways that entrepreneurs in particular can strengthen their cases. And it is the case that, the government released guidance this year that was particularly aimed at making it easier for entrepreneurs to qualify and trying to show that some of this, investor interest or interest from, let's say you're developing a product and you have, big kind of chains that want to purchase your product or are interested in your product, that those types of evidence that aren't, thought of as quickly for the National Interest Waiver are now, specifically officers are being told to focus on those things, particularly for entrepreneurs. Other things that are helpful can be any receipt of kind of government grants or any, local or state grants for the business in the area of expertise. If there's any intellectual property that the applicant has developed, if they can show strong revenue growth, if there's anyone that's reviewed their products and, has favorable reviews and that's a strong brand, that's something that can also be helpful, for entrepreneurs. And I think, something else with entrepreneurs that's really key, that's a change from the old standard, is that previously, when they talked about, national importance and national in scope, there was more of a focus on geography, that geographically it had to be, across the United States. In matter of Danazar, what they said is, endeavors can be nationally important, even if they only focus on one particular area. So for example, if a company is creating a lot of jobs, in an economically depressed area, that can still satisfy, the standard of national importance, even though from a geographic perspective, the person's, that the company is not hiring across the United States. So I think that's something that's really key and helpful for entrepreneurs as they think about the National Interest Waiver.
Thank you, Kelly. Thank you so much. This was very informative. So I think we have some questions in the Q&A box. So the first question is if we have done any cases for pilots and if pilot can qualify for an NIW.
Sure. And so I'd encourage you as well to go to our website, because we actually have a blog post particularly about this issue. And this is something that comes up a lot. So just being a pilot, just because there's a national shortage of pilots and you're a pilot, that does not qualify you for an EB-2. And I think there's some misinformation out there, that kind of guides people towards thinking this. Pilots can potentially qualify for an EB-2, but generally they need to be doing something beyond just coming to be a pilot for an employer. So for example, if there was a pilot that had some specialized, knowledge about kind of training of particular, areas, and they were going to bring that to the United States and had a plan for kind of disseminating that information or providing some type of larger value to the aviation industry beyond just being a pilot, but that went above and beyond that they could show that there was an endeavor beyond just being a pilot, that there was perhaps some specialized training aspect to it or some specialized knowledge that was going to be disseminated or consulting that was going to be done, that would need to be part of the application. It wouldn't be possible to just get an EB-2 because someone is a pilot.
Thank you. And is it helpful for the NIW if you already kind of mentioned this, but is it helpful if a certain profession is in shortage?
So I think that that can be helpful, but it's not enough by itself. They're going to look at what is the proposed endeavor. So it couldn't just be, well, we're short on aerospace engineers and you're an aerospace engineer and you want to work in the United States as an aerospace engineer. The actual, like, what is the endeavor that you want to do in the United States? Why does it have substantial merit? Why does it have national importance? So it needs to kind of go above and beyond just participating in the skilled labor market in the United States, even when there is a shortage. The fact that there's a shortage is certainly something that can be mentioned and would be helpful, but you would need to show how your particular planned endeavor is going to help address issues in the United States of this substantial, and have substantial merit and national importance.
Thank you. And there is another question that asks, I think basically about the exceptional ability and kind of like the membership requirement or the membership criterion. So the question is, would membership in Project Management Institute qualify? It's a paid membership association, but you would have to take a test to basically get into the organization. So would that qualify?
So I think potentially, you know, just because something has a paid membership component doesn't mean it can't qualify. What you'd want to do is you'd want to be able to show, you know, of the, you know, percentage of people that take this test, you know, only a very small percentage get in, you know, because it's a very difficult test that requires significant expertise. So, you know, I can't say on this, you know, in this panel whether or not this particular membership will qualify. What I can say is what you'd want to do is look at, you know, the background of the membership, what it is that's required besides, you know, the fee and passing the test. And then when we talk about passing the test, how many professionals are passing this test? You know, is it something easy that everybody generally passes, like becoming a notary or something like that? Or is this something where only like the top people are really making it in? And are there any other criteria that are helpful? For example, do you have to be invited to take the test? Do you have to be invited to apply to be in it? Do you have to meet any criteria? So those are the types of things you'd want to look at to determine if you should include it.
Thanks, Kelly. We have a next question, which is a little bit more general. So it asks, I just checked my NIW status online. It was changed to request for further evidence, but I haven't received anything at my address. So
yeah. So, I mean, if you haven't, you know, that's really a procedural question, but, you know, USCIS has something called e-service tools where you can go and request a notice if you haven't received it yet. That being said, it can sometimes take, you know, a few weeks to get the notice, but usually on the case status, it will tell you by what date you should have received it. And if you haven't, just submit that e-service request to ask for a new copy of the request for evidence.
Perfect. Thank you. Let me see. I think there is a, let's see. I think we have a.
So we don't, I see this email is talking about an email from our firm wanting a consultation after a CV review. We do not do CV reviews and then email back asking for consultations. What we do is there are paid consultations you can set up on our website. You know, we don't provide kind of you know, like advice on whether or not you might qualify by reviewing prior to a consultation. So I'm not sure if that was with our firm or a different firm, but if you received our consult information, then that just means you can set up a consult with us. It doesn't mean that anyone has reviewed your CV for, you know, qualifying for the visa.
Thank you. Perfect. So I think these were, let's see, I think there is one last question. If I'm joining an early stage startup at pre-seed stage, do I need to have equity and how much? Can it be a part-time engagement?
So this just really depends on kind of how you're framing your proposed endeavor. So if you're self-petitioning, you may have multiple startups that you're working with. We have people who are applying based on kind of having consulting relationships with multiple companies. So it's not necessarily the case that you have to have equity. It's not necessarily the case that you have to have any one full-time engagement with any particular company, but you do need to have a full-time roster of work in this area of substantial merit and national importance. And if this startup would only be one component of what you'd be doing in the United States, you know, and it's a part-time component, you would need to have other aspects to what your proposed endeavor is. So I think that generally, if you're going to try to qualify as an entrepreneur, that's a situation where you have a lot of equity in the company, because otherwise kind of proof of investment, proof of interest from outside people is not really going to reflect on you if you're someone that doesn't have equity in the company or is not a member of the founding team.
Perfect. Thanks, Kelly. And I think we have one last question, and it asks, I heard from my friends that they received RFE, which are pertinent to IT professionals, and USCIS challenged two prongs, which are substantial merit and national importance. Yes, I would say wait for the RFE once you receive it, and then I would recommend perhaps scheduling a consultation, and then we could kind of advise you on your particular situation and how to respond to the RFE.
Exactly. Absolutely. And then someone's also asking about visa applications for pilots. If you'd like to do an assessment of kind of your potential, visa options, I would suggest setting up a consult. It is possible for U.S. employers to sponsor, pilots for an immigrant visa through the PERM process. That does require the labor certification. So if you have questions about that, I would, suggest setting up a consultation. We do not speak about kind of our prices on, these webinars. Someone's asked a question about prices. Please, reach out to us. You will be receiving multiple things after this webinar, including the ability to reach out to us for consultations. And we're happy to speak specifically about our prices and timelines in those emails.
Perfect. Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Kelly. And thank you so much, everyone, for joining us. And as mentioned in the beginning, we'll be sending our NIW PowerPoint and NIW visa guide later today, and you can reach out to us if you have any questions. So thank you so much, and have a good day. Bye-bye.
Thank you.